how to play Rolemaster Classic.
Hello, I'm Chris, alternatively known on this channel as GM Chance, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this, which is episode 11 of a 20-part series all about how to play Rolemaster, specifically how to play Rolemaster Classic or Rolemaster 2nd Edition. As you can see on screen, today we're talking about an overview of how to run the game, and also looking at injuries, healing, and death in Rolemaster. A little bit more about this video series. As mentioned, it's 20 episodes, and it's a walkthrough of how to play the game. It's designed to be, it is in depth, and it is going to be by the book. In each of these videos, we do go through step by step, looking at how to create a character and how to ultimately run and play the game. And the idea is that the rules will be explained with plenty of examples and in-play contexts and scenarios, etc. What these videos are not is they're not meant to be a generic how do you play tabletop role-playing games. It's assumed that somebody watching this video already has an idea of what a games master is and what a player is and roughly how a tabletop role-playing game works. Also, these are not designed to be quick start guides. As mentioned before, these are in-depth. And then lastly, no house rules and no optional rules. Rolemaster has many optional rules, and we're essentially ignoring all of them. We have included a couple of very minor ones, but in essence, this is the base version, the vanilla version of this game, and ideally the easiest one for me to teach to you, viewers of this video, how to play this amazing role-playing game. Into it. So, this video is going to be a very brief overview, looking at skill checks, but particularly focusing on healing and death in the game. This is the roadmap of the 20 videos. If you haven't watched them before, you might want to go back and have a look at the ones on character creation, where we break down, as you can see on screen, the different steps of how to develop your Rolemaster character. We're now into the section about actually running the game, which I'll talk through right now. So, the different videos that we're going to be looking at and how to actually run the game and to handle skill checks and the mechanics, etc. This video, the overview video, we'll also be looking at movement and maneuvers, static maneuvers as well, magic, combat and creatures, and experience. And each one of these will have their own videos coming up. This video is going to touch on very lightly all of these topics, but focus on a bit more in depth about the healing and recovery and death mechanics in this game, because I'm not doing a separate video on that. So just some core ideas, some core concepts about Rolemaster. So the basic idea is when to roll the dice. Basically, is there a real risk, or is there stress or uncertainty? If not, then no roll is needed in a given situation, which is pretty much the rule for pretty much any role-playing game, right? You roll the dice when it's interesting to roll the dice. So basic stuff like walking and climbing normal stairs or drawing a weapon or whatever, you don't need to roll the dice for. But the general mechanic is the player declares the action, the GM decides if a roll is needed, and then you roll and add on your skill bonus, add on any modifiers, and then the GM checks a chart. Rolemaster breaks tactical time down into a 10-second round. Again, as most role-playing games do, there is some form of a turn or a round or something that allows each character their chance in the spotlight. The system for Rolemaster, declare, so all combatants declare what their actions are planning on doing, all players declare what their characters are doing at the beginning of the rounds. Rolling initiative is very common in most role-playing games to determine who gets to go first and second and third and so on. Then resolving the actions, then tracking any upkeep. And as mentioned, yes, a Rolemaster round is 10 seconds long, and combatants typically have 100% activity to spend over that period of time, over those 10 seconds. And how do you spend your time? Well, this chart determines that. It's quite a busy chart, I appreciate, but it breaks down what a character can do over the course of 10 seconds in a Rolemaster. I might just pop this off. There we go. That's better. And you can see there the percentages, which breaks down into seconds. So, for example, a full perception roll is 30%, in other words, 3 seconds to have a really good look around you, versus, for example, 20% or 2 seconds to draw a weapon, and so on. In my opinion, this is one of the most important tables, probably the most important table, to get your head around, at least as a player. So if you're relatively unfamiliar about how to play Rolemaster, firstly understanding what your character can do, and then fixating on this chart to figure out in the tactical round what your character can do in their allotted time. And we'll spend a bit more time, quite a bit more time, in the combat and creatures video, breaking this down and what it means a bit more. Just one thing to note, if we go to melee attack, it has up here, between 50 and 100% of your time. So in other words, between a minimum of 5 seconds to a maximum of 10 seconds. Just to explain that the designers of this game didn't think that it takes a full 5 seconds to swing a sword minimum, or 10 seconds to swing a sword once in this game. The idea is that actually over those either 5 or up to 10 seconds, you're probably swinging your sword multiple times, but the dice roll that you make to see whether you succeed or hit is one of those swings that you do, the one that has the most likely damage. So in terms of theatre of the mind, or whatever you want to call it, over that 10 seconds, your character's probably parrying and swinging and blocking and then thrusting or whatever, and it's that one critical roll that we roll the dice for, that one critical moment we roll the dice for. So in terms of some common action resolution types, we've touched on a number of these in previous videos, but the ones up on screen are the most common in Rolemaster. So moving maneuvers, which should have an MM rather than an SM, whoops. Static maneuvers, SM. Attacks, and you break down attack into your offensive bonus versus your defensive bonus, OB versus DB. Spells, and there are 4 types of spells, which we'll come to in a second. Resistance rolls, and special purpose or special skills that fall, or skills or activities that fall kind of outside the normal parameters of how most skills work. Ambush is a good example of that. And we'll come on to pretty much all of these in later videos in more depth. Moving maneuvers, used when a character, as it says on screen, moves under pressure. So, climbing or riding or stalking or moving an armor or dodging out of the way or whatever it is. When it's a critical situation, we roll the dice. And the procedure is the player states what they want to do. I'll just move myself over. There we go. States what they want to do. The GM sets a difficulty. Assuming the player wants their character to attempt that activity, they roll a D percentile, which can either go up or down, as with pretty much all Rolemaster rolls. Add on any additional relevant modifiers, so the skill bonus or any armor details or wounds or whatever, and then check the chart. And speaking of the chart, this is the moving maneuver table. You can see along the top the different levels of difficulty. all the way from a routine, all the way down to an absurd. And in terms of what the results and the roll down here, and you'll see a very low result versus a very high result. That's based on the idea that we discussed before about the open-ended. So if you roll really, really poorly, in other words, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on your first roll, you roll down. If you roll really well, which is a 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, you roll up. And if you do that again, you keep going, either down or up, and which can produce really, really amazing effects down the bottom, or really bad effects down the top. So in terms of how to read the chart with the numbers, they can be read really in two kind of ways. You either can break down the number into a percentage chance of the character being able to complete the action. So let's take a routine action, for example, leaping over a very short chasm. A chasm, say, can't see on camera, about yay wide. It's essentially a negligible action, maybe a little bit wider, but it's really not that much of a challenge. It's considered a routine. The character has a chance of failing it in some way, shape, or form. If they have a 90% chance to either succeed or fail. They roll the dice, and assuming they roll 90 or under, they're fine. The other way to read the chart is the percentage of activity that you manage to get through. So depending on the activity, where there isn't a binary either succeed or fail, you could have an activity where you only get a certain percentage of that movement or that activity done. An example could be, let's go back to another routine. The character is crawling along over relatively flat terrain, and the GM asks them to make a crawling roll because of other constraints in the game. And let's say they don't roll very well, they get a result of, say, a 50. They would only travel 50% of their normal movement to wriggle across the ground. If they rolled higher, they would get either 100% or even a certain amount more than that if they roll really, really well. And you can see the descriptors, some of the descriptions in the game can be really brutal. If you really mess up on an absurd, fall, crush the skull, that's not great. All the way down to, for example, move inspires your allies plus 32 friendly rolls for 3 rounds, and everything in between. Static maneuvers, similar kind of process in terms of, and I'll just bump myself over, there we go. Similar kind of process of the player declaring what their character wants to do. The GM decides on the difficulty of the maneuver. The player then decides whether or not they want their character to attempt to complete. They roll the dice, open-ended roll, add on any relevant skills, check the modifiers. But in this case, no chart required, at least in the very core vanilla version of the rules. No chart required. It's just simply success or success on 101 plus, or failure if it's below that. And common static maneuvers, static maneuvers are, guess what? Maneuvers which involve you not moving, and they include things in the game like picking locks, disarming traps, perception, tracking, influence, etc. Resistance rolls is a topic we've looked at previously, but this is actually the chart that we use to determine whether or not a character succeeds or fails their resistance. In spell law used against spells like sleep or charm or other forms of enchantment, and the same for poisons and diseases. So we have an attack level along the top. So let's say a really toxic poison. I'll just move myself down. There we go. A really toxic poison of, say, a level 15. That's the attack level, so a really, really nasty poison. And it's a 6th level character that has to try to resist that poison. As it says there, you've got to either meet or beat a 72 for that poison to either take effect or not. Now, this is not resistance rolls are not skills you train in, they are inherent in your character. And they're inherent for two reasons. The first is your race. So certain races get certain modifications for either magic or disease or poison or whatnot, just because of the race that they are, but also dependent on the relevant statistic bonus. So to resist the poison, as we just were talking about before, you would use your constitution stat. So you'd roll the dice, you would add on your resistance roll modifier, hopefully a bonus, and that would include things like whether you're resistant because of your race to poisons, and also what your constitution stat is. If you beat 72, you're fine. If you get less than 72, you're in trouble. 72, sorry, if you meet 72, so if you roll 72 or get better, you're fine. If you roll less, you're in trouble. And with both diseases and poisons, depending on how well you either or how poorly you roll, you can get degrees of effect on you. We'll come to that a bit later on when we have a look at the rulebook. Offensive bonuses represent a combatant's total attacking ability, as it says on screen. And this can either be specialization in a particular weapon, as we talked about when we developed our example character, or in specific spells, specifically bolt spells, fire bolt, ice bolt, water bolt, etc. So you train specifically in a weapon or in a spell, and you use your development points to train in that particular skill. You get your stats added onto that, and then other things such as your level and professional bonuses. And then there are situational modifiers which are added on top of that as well. Your position, your range, your activity percentage, penalties, etc. So you have your number on your sheet for your skill, you roll the dice, you add on the number on your sheet, and there could be other mods to see whether you succeed or fail in your attack. Defensive bonus is subtracted, as it says on screen, subtracted from every attacker's roll. And defensive bonus, again, is not a skill that you learn in, your skill that you use, it's just inherent, and it's inherently based on your quickness. But it can include other things as well, such as your armor quality, position and cover, whether or not you're using a shield. And again, with a shield, you don't train in a shield. You simply pick up a shield and you stick it in front of you, and so long as you're aware of the attack, the shield will give you an increased defensive bonus. But you need to be aware of the attack and have the shield facing the right way, etc. And then the last thing that can help with your defensive bonus is parrying. We'll come to parrying in some detail when we get onto the combat video. In terms of spell types, there are 4 basic spell types in Rolemaster. The first is the base casting roll, and these are non-attack spells. You don't train in this ability other than any level bonuses that you might get as a magic user. These types of spells are, just as they say, non-attack spells. So they're spells that deal with information, or utility spells, or movement, or fly, or invisibility, or healing spells. So non-attack spells. And they fail on a 1 or a 2 automatically. The next one is base attack rolls. So these are used for magical non-elemental attacks. And again, you can't train in these, you only get your level bonus. You roll the base attack roll or the bar roll, and depending on how well you roll, that affects the resistance roll that the defender also needs to make. So casting a sleep spell with essence, you add on your level bonus for your base attacks, and then the defender makes a resistance roll. And if they roll really well, they resist your sleep spell. If they roll poorly, they fall asleep. The next type is elemental attacks, or elemental attack rolls. I missed out the word roll there. And these are fire, ice, lightning, etc. water bolts. And as mentioned just a moment ago, these are learnt individually in the same way that weapons are. And then lastly, area attack spells. So, whoops, and we've got spells there, so double spells. These are ball spells, such as fireball or ice ball, and they also don't have any training involved. They only involve your level bonus. So cancelling actions in Rolemaster, stuff happens on the battlefield, stuff happens in play that suddenly your intended declared action at the start of the round has completely changed because of what's happened. You can cancel a particular action and you take a 10% penalty as a result of that. That's trying to simulate in the game that you basically pause for 1 second. So 10% activity is, of course, 1 second out of your 10 seconds that you have over the course of a round. So you pause for 10% or 1 second to kind of reorientate, rethink about the next thing you're going to do, and then you do a different skill, or you attempt a different action, or you do whatever. Recovery, permanent damage, and death in Rolemaster. So how injured you are logically tracks to how long it takes to recover. And some wounds, if they are serious enough, may never actually fully heal. Death in Rolemaster comes in 3 forms in this game. The first is loss of hit points. So, oops, I'll just move myself up. There we go. The first way a character can die is loss of hit points. So when a character reaches 0 hits in this game, they don't die, they fall unconscious. If you keep taking hit points after that, typically from a bleeding result. So as we'll see in a minute, you can get critical results in this game that result in you bleeding out your hit points. If you fall unconscious and you're still bleeding, those reduction of hit points start chewing into your actual constitution stat. Not the bonus, the stat. And if that gets all the way down to 0, you die. Essentially, you bleed out. So that's the first way a character can die. The second way a character can die is essentially having their soul ripped out of their body or soul destruction. We'll come on to that in a second. And the third, and by far the most common way of dying in Rolemaster, is through a critical strike. Rolemaster has a system of both making a roll to see if you hit, and if you do hit, you can either do just hit points, or you can get hit points and a critical. And often these critical results are the things that will kill a character. We'll see another example in a second. After death, there are a couple of things that happen to a character, principally deterioration of that character's stats pretty promptly. And then also the character's soul can depart from their body. We'll come on to that in a second. In fact, we'll come on to that now. So in terms of healing, character lore says that life is the union of both body and soul, and both can be damaged. And damage to a character's soul is typically in the form of either evil or undead magic, and that actually kind of pulls away part of your life essence, part of your constitution is sapped, and once that reaches 0, you're toast. And there are other ways that evil or undead magic can slay a character from essentially taking its soul. In terms of healing, you've got several different options. So magical healing, as it says, it's the fastest, but it requires access to someone who can cast the spell, and also you need money. Often you need money. And spell lore provides a very detailed system in terms of magical healing. Herbal medicine and like first aid and surgery, so a bit slower and they're skill dependent, and obviously you need access to the herbs. And then lastly, natural recovery. So this is just naturally how long it would take for your body to recover from a particular injury. So rest and time sometimes can be weeks or even months for severe wounds, and also races impact the recovery time, which we'll come to in a second. And in terms of restoring damage to a character's soul, clerical magic and some very rare herbs can restore the dead to life, but it's, as it says, both expensive and restrictive. So where do injuries in Rolemaster come from? Not exclusively, but most commonly, they come from critical results, such as this critical table up on screen. This is the slash critical table. And this mechanism in the game, or this element in the game, I think provides some great storytelling along with, frankly, quite a bit of gore and blood and guts and all the rest. A critical table is ordered with the least severe column here, which is the A critical, all the way down to the most severe critical, which is an E critical. And if we have a look at, say, for example, a 71 in a D, slash muscle and sever tendons in foe's lower leg. Foe is stunned for 3 rounds and cannot parry for the next 2 rounds. Foe is at -50. In the combat video, the upcoming combat video, will discuss what it means to be stunned and what it means to not be able to parry. But in terms of the actual injury itself, so you've taken a very, very bad cut to your lower leg. Your muscles have been severed along with some of your tendons. And everything your character does is at -50. Everything your character does. Picking a lock, they're at -50. Fighting, they're at -50. Casting a spell, they're at -50. Now, why does that apply? Why does that penalty apply to non-physical things? The idea in the game is you're suffering in terms of pain and trauma, and basically just your body is in shock from the damage you've just taken. Hence the reason every single dice roll you make, you're at a whopping -50. So in terms of healing injuries with first aid requires a successful static action. It can heal light injuries with proper equipment and can reduce bleeding up to 5 hits a round, but is limited against really serious injuries and things like nerve and organ damage. It has no effect. So you'll see that injuries are classified either as light, medium, or severe, and you can see on screen what that means. So a light injury is a penalty up to 20, and bleeding at up to 5 hits per round. Medium, you can see the amount there, up to 50 for your penalty, and severe is 51 or over, shattered bones, organ damage, and bleeding at more than 10 hits a round. In terms of figuring out how long it takes to recover from an injury, assuming you're just wanting time to recover from an injury, this is the chart that you use. How to figure it out? You roll the dice down here, again hoping for a high result. You add on your constitution bonus and you get a result. And the numbers on screen are for light injuries. As it says there, you multiply the figure for ×5 for medium injuries and ×10 for severe injuries. And this time it takes is modified by what race you are. So common humans are the base, that's what's on screen. High elves take double the amount of time to heal, whereas other races like halflings or orcs take half the amount of time to heal. So as it says on screen, the same severe injury that would take a human 20 days to heal would take a high elf 40, but only 10 for either an orc or a halfling. And you can imagine, going back to that -50 that we talked about a second ago, that's a pretty intense penalty to have for your character. So injuries can play a really and significant role in this game. One thing to note is penalties do go down over time. So let's say it took someone 40 days for them to heal from an injury. it would take that as the days tick on, that penalty would decrease down to finally being 0, where they're fully healed. So diseases and poison in Rolemaster have a very detailed system for each, which I think adds some real flavor to storytelling in your game. And with both disease and poisons, they often don't just do damage, they often can create ongoing consequences and ongoing problems for a character. And for me, this is why, part of the reason why Rolemaster is so dangerous, because consequences persist. Wounds linger. Sometimes they never fully heal. Poisons can spread, diseases progress, and death is certainly a very real possibility in this game. And this is, for me at least, what separates Rolemaster from lighter systems. Every fight, every failed roll, every dark dungeon does carry genuine weight and genuine risk for a particular character. So that's essentially it. Looking at kind of an overview of some of the very, very basics of how to run the game. We'll be breaking down into separate videos some of the other elements I talked about before, so the maneuvers and the combat, etc. But in terms of focusing particularly for healing injuries and death in this game, in this video, let's go now to the rulebooks to show you where to find this information. So if we go to here we go. And hopefully this is now looking a very familiar book for those that have been following these videos. So if we go down to this section, all the way down, long way down the book, we're into the section called Running Rolemaster. And we go down, here we go, Healing, Injury and Death. It talks about body and soul, which was the point I was making before between the separation of both. I might just increase that a smidge, there we go. It talks about healing spells, the use of healing herbs, what kind of professions can cast healing spells, clerics, animists, healers, etc. Medicine and first aid. The healing herbs, of course, we looked at in one of the previous episodes about equipping and outfitting your character. We looked through briefly some of the list of herbs that you can get. Natural healing, which we talked about just a moment ago, and that's the healing recovery table with the time it takes to recover from injuries. A bit more on injuries. The injury classification, light, medium, severe. Different treatments you can do, thinking about will there be a permanent injury, etc. A bit about first aid and what first aid can heal and what it can't. Recovery from wounds. Permanent damage. So permanent damage basically is if you get a severe injury, there is a chance of permanent damage. You make a dice roll, and if you're lucky, there's no permanent disability. If you're unlucky, you could end up with a minus permanently from whatever the injury you have. Looking at death in Rolemaster, so the 3 ways a character can die. Death from massive shock, so loss of concussion hits, loss of hit points. You remember you go down to 0 first off, you fall unconscious, and then if you keep taking damage, if you keep taking hit points, if you reach 0 out of your constitution stat, your character is dead. Death due to soul destruction, often due to evil magic and undead critters. And then the most common by far and away, death due to critical strikes, so significant major wounds. Talks in here about the effect of death, the deterioration of stats, and the departure of the soul, which we've touched on. And a bit more information about those. That's how fast your stats deteriorate. There's information about the departure of your soul. Into the disease section, it looks at making the resistance roll, and if you fail it only by a little bit, guess what? You have a mild effect, all the way down to if you fail it by a lot, you get an extreme effect. We have the disease descriptions, including bubonic diseases and generic and psychiatric diseases, etc. The effect descriptions. So bubonic, for example, it describes how that particular disease is transmitted, how long it takes to appear, what a mild result is, what a moderate result is, what a severe result is, and what an extreme result is. It's pretty gnarly, nasty stuff in here. And then that's essentially replicated for the 6 types of poisons: circulatory, conversion, muscle, nerve, reduction, and respiratory. Where the poisons may affect, the poison descriptions, and again, mild poisoning, moderate poisoning, severe poisoning, extreme poisoning, or circulation poisons, and your other poisons there. So that's where to find the key information about at least injury, healing, and death in Rolemaster, and it starts on what page? On page 144. We're now going to swap books, and we are going to go to Spell Lore. Again, hopefully this is now a familiar book for you. I'm going to look a few pages here. The first is 44, just a very brief piece of text. Where is it? There we go. Just touches on healing spells, and we'll have a look at some healing spells in a second. So yeah, it basically just touches on what healing spells are. And then if we go down to page 70 and 71, there's a little bit more information about healing, which is largely a regurgitation of what we just looked at in character lore. Now I'm just realizing that I didn't put on my presentation, my wee notes before, to actually look at some healing spells, but we should do that. So if we go down to Boneways, so this is a healer list. So mild, minor fracture repair, all the way down to basically joining a limb that has been severed, and kind of everything in between. So you've got minor fracture repair, cartilage repair, major fracture repair, repairing a skull, joint repair, etc. So that's typically this is going to be injuries that a character has sustained from a critical. Not always, but typically. If you're wanting to heal hit points and also muscle healing, or healing organs, healing frostbite, etc. Also healing blood loss, so clotting, cut repair, etc. And in terms of healing essentially just hit points, we have, for example, the lay healing. This is a lay healing list. Concussion mastery, and that is just simply healing hit points, right? So healing 1, target is healed 1 to 10 concussion hits. So a bit of a sample of some of the magic options, the spell options for healing characters in Rolemaster. Pretty granular, pretty detailed, as you can see. Looking at everything from healing bone injuries to organ injuries to muscle injuries, etc. And in this case, we're talking about just simply healing hit points. So, yep, just back to checking off our little check sheet to see what we've covered. So in the rulebooks, we've looked at, specifically for this episode, healing injuries and death. And those are the key pages to check out, 144 to 149. Diseases and poison, straight after that. And then the healing spell information, a little bit in spell lore, which is essentially repetition of what's in character lore. And the page numbers aren't listed on the sheet, but we've had a look at some of the example spell lists you can use for healing in Rolemaster. The other information, kind of the core how to run the game, we'll be dealing with, as I mentioned before, in individual videos coming up. So, where to buy this fantastic game if you are interested? Drive-Thru RPG is your friend, where you can purchase either the PDF or get print on demand, and that's for Rolemaster Classic, which is this version of the game, what we've been talking about. Previous editions, as mentioned, sadly are out of print. So either heading to eBay or secondhand markets or your friendly local game store or whatever is your best option there. If you're interested in seeing Rolemaster in action, strongly encourage you to head to the playlists on this channel and check out some of our videos to see how the game is played. The caveat there, of course, is we do use a lot of home rules and also a fair number of optional rules too. If you're interested in getting a copy of the blank character sheet, have a look at the link down below, and there's also copies of the example character as well. Lastly, what's next? Next, we're looking at episode 12, movement and moving maneuvers. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed the video, and see you in the next one.